At Southern Company, we know the right solutions start with the right questions. Like, how do we deliver clean, reliable, affordable energy for today and tomorrow? Southern Company, building the future of energy.
This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks in Columbia. 107.5 The Game on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach and 100.5 The Game in Florida.
By Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you on this Tuesday morning. How you feeling this morning, Wes?
I'm great, guys. I didn't think I would be, but I'm fantastic.
I loved last night where Chris explicitly said at about, 7:30 or 8, we're definitely not talking about the Braves tomorrow. And then about an hour later, oh yes, we're definitely talking about the Braves tomorrow.
So I do pride myself on us making this hour about Gamecocks as much as possible, because we will get angry texts and tweets. Hey, it's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. What are you doing? But they're going to have to indulge me for just a moment.
It's okay.
That's the best baseball game I've ever seen in my entire life. End of story.
The range of emotions over the course of a couple of hours was something, because you're halfway through that game getting no hit through 5 innings. Like, well, it's been a fun season. And then, a couple innings later, you finally get some runs going, get the home runs, and then one of the most improbable plays you'll ever see to end the game. And I brought this up at the end of the last segment, the fact that it was Bryce Harper that was the final out was just kind of like icing on the cake, because, of course, he's been a thorn in the Braves' sides for a long time. Very easy player to dislike from the opposing fan base view. So, the fact that he was involved in that at the end just made that even, 10 times better.
Yeah, it was awesome. I was reading on The Athletic today. Everything that happened last night has never happened before. Literally everything.
Right.
There's never been a double play started by an outfielder to end a game in the playoffs.
Right.
So not even an 8-5-3, which is the most improbable double play you could possibly have, I think. But never been a double play started by an outfielder to end a playoff game. Never been a team to be no hit that deep into a game and be down 4-0 in postseason play, I think I read. It just insane all the way around. And then with everything that was improbable about this, the most improbable thing might be that ball found its way to Austin Riley, of all people, because he's not even involved. If you look at the mechanics of where you're supposed to be cutting that ball off, he's not even involved. He's covering third,
right?
But just has the heads up, just baseball IQ to realize what is happening, to realize there's no threat now to third base. Let me get over here and make myself useful. The second baseman and shortstop, they're going out on a double cut, basically. And there's really not a mechanism to cut it off, throwing back to first base from shortstop, because everybody's setting up for a potential throw to third or home there.
Sure.
And for just the catch in the first place, the acceleration that Michael Harris showed, because off the bat, I thought it was going to be a somewhat easy, kind of a fly ball to the warning track.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can just see Harris put it into an extra gear. And I was like, he may be burnt. And then you go from, oh no, is he burnt, to oh no, is this ball going out, to oh, he's about to have to make a great play, to oh, he just did make a great play. And then I thought BA, Brian Anderson
on TBS.
I thought he was fantastic.
Great call.
The calls were fantastic for all the big plays.
Have you heard Ben Ingram's call on the Braves radio network?
I think I did.
For those that have not heard it, he loses his mind. Here's what he sounded like.
Fire 2-2. In the air out towards right center field. Harris going to go back. Harris back to the warning track. He leaps. Michael's got it! He's got it! They fired it in, and it rolls across the infield. Taken by Riley. He throws to the bag. They double him off. Ball game over. Braves win. I've never seen a play like that. Oh! Braves even up the series. It was back to the wall. Harris went to the wall. Harper took off. He made a leaping catch to the wall. Fired it in. It rolled past Halby's. Backing up the play was Riley. He secured it, threw to the bag, doubled off Harper, and the Braves even up the series.
Hopefully he got some oxygen after that one.
Yeah, that was good. I liked BA's call because it was obviously not coming from a Braves perspective, but
sure.
He like perfectly walked the line between I'm a national announcer. I've been pretty even throughout the whole game, but I'm watching something historic while also telling me what's happening. Like he threw in there mid call while one of the maybe greatest defensive plays in postseason history is happening. He throws in the Harper may be doubled up.
Right. That was the best part of the call.
Which then grabs your attention, because you couldn't see that.
Because the camera, you can't see that he didn't tag up, so you don't know what's going on. Obviously, the Braves infielders knew the situation, but good on him to
add that in flawlessly.
Right.
And I thought the call of Riley's home run was fantastic as well. The whole thing, then you shoot out to the just broad view from Elon Musk's satellites or something from where you see the fireworks going off from above Truist. And I mean, kudos to that TBS crew, that whole thing, whoever's in the back saying, hey, cut to this camera, cut to this. The whole thing was really, really good and well captured. I wish they would turn the crowd noise up just a little bit in the truck would be my one kind of nitpick on the whole thing. But man, just crazy all the way around. But Austin Riley, I got to admit, I did not know if he was going to come through there, and he comes through with the biggest home run of his career.
That was defensively, that was kind of like his Derek Jeter moment.
Yes.
Like where Jeter made that play where he just goes and backs up home plate, scoops the ball. They asked somebody, he's like, my instinct just told me to get over there.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought once we finally could see that angle of the camera, that was my favorite part of the call from BA, just saying Harper maybe doubled off. I was like, oh, really? I had no idea. And then, Riley gets the ball and you're like, oh, well, Harper's going to, my immediate instinct or thought was like, Harper's going to make it back. And an absolute rope. Like the ball just appeared in Matt Olson's glove. Like it was an absolute rope. Threw it in a hurry, but that was a great play. That game went so quickly from despair to joy.
Well, it obviously wasn't an elimination game, but you go down 2 games, head on the road to Philadelphia. Tough. It's like, all right, this probably isn't going to happen for the Braves again this year.
Your odds at that point, because it's 2 good teams at that point. Just the sheer randomness of baseball probably is going to beat you when you have to win 3 games at that point, and they only have to get 1. So the randomness of baseball is a killer in the playoffs. So you have to do enough to not fall into that spot. Right. I feel like, but now the momentum completely shifts into the Braves side. You go from this is Undertaker, laying down. He's done, and then he pops up, choke slam, and then 3 count. Right off. So I've always thought, a walk-off home run is, probably the biggest punch to the gut. But I've always thought the home team late bottom of the 8th home run, and then, you go from thinking you've won this thing to being right up there, having to bat with 3 outs after having control of the entire series.
Right.
I've always thought that was one of the biggest gut punches as well.
Shout out to your likeness, Travis d'Arnaud, for his home run in the 7th.
Hey, that was huge. Hey, scoring the sort of what seemed just like a meaningless run off of Trey Turner's bobble.
Yeah. Well, that was like, okay, well, they finally got on the board, finally got, from being shut out. And
how huge did that end up being?
Definitely so. But yeah, those home runs in the 7th and 8th innings obviously ends up putting them over the top. And like I said, just a fantastic game all around. And hopefully the next couple games are not as, nerve-wracking.
Oh, they will be. This is going 5. This is going 5.
Yeah, I kind of had that feeling too. And, tomorrow night, likely going to be starting Bryce Elder, who's not
maybe
performed well as of late. We'll see. That seems to be, we'll see what they decide to do. They haven't announced it yet. And obviously you don't have Charlie Morton for this series as he's on the IL. And Max Fried, rough outing last night, obviously returned from that blister, which you knew was going to be a concern. You were optimistic maybe he'd be able to put in a good performance, but it went south quickly on him.
Yeah, I saw this thing again from The Athletic. There's only been 4 or 5 pitchers ever in postseason history to win a game when they were coming off of that much rest going into a game. Mm-hmm. So that was tough. Going up against Wheeler, he was fantastic. Really made the one mistake that d'Arnaud made him pay for. And so, yeah, the odds were against you in a lot of ways, but they evened this thing up. We'll see if they go Elder, could go bullpen game. We'll see. But you're going to need Max Fried at some point. Unless you win game 3 and then go bullpen game 4 and just save Strider for 5. I saw that talked about online, but I'm guessing you keep Strider on 5 days rest or normal 5 days and pitch him game 4 again.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what happens now. If you end up starting Elder, it might inadvertently end up becoming a bullpen game if things go the way they've gone recently. And you talk about somebody coming off a lot of rest with Max Fried. Elder, it's been almost 2 weeks since he last started a game against Chicago, so coming in with a fair amount of rest himself.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. They could go A.J. Smith-Shawver. I even saw the throw Brad Hand out there for an inning just as a lefty matchup. But I think when they go against lefties, they move Harper to 4th. So they spread out their lefties.
Right.
So it keeps you, if they had 2 of the first 3 were lefties, you could maybe manipulate it a little bit. But they purposely, because Schwarber obviously leads off, he's a lefty.
Yep.
And then I think they move Bryce to 4th so that you don't kind of have, it seems like a lot of teams, if you have limited lefties, you're putting them where there's 2 righties or switch guys in between because of that 3-batter rule, it seems like.
Right. All right, we'll get back on track with some Gamecocks
Promise,
stuff
all Gamecocks the rest of the way.
Yeah, of course, taking on Florida this upcoming weekend. We'll take a peek back to the rough game they had in Swamp last year and set the table for what's coming up this weekend. You're listening to Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse.
Get an inside look at Hollywood with Michael Rosenbaum, talking with the Phelps brothers.
My gym I go to here is owned by a load of Polish guys. I don't really fit in, a bit leaner, shall we say. And this guy waddles over to me one day and he said, I was back in Poland visiting my family and my niece said, you're going to have to see this program. All of a sudden I see you and he's at my gym. My niece wouldn't believe me, so I had to have a photo with this guy, his name is literally Tank as well.
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, wherever you listen.
Boss is here!
Military parents never miss a beat, and neither does the Johns Hopkins U.S. Family Health Plan. Built for every warrior in your family. With more than 40 years of service to military families, TRICARE Prime benefits plus exclusive extras. Learn more at warriorsathome.com.
Subs here on the game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks in Columbia, 107.5 The Game. Also heard on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach and 100.5 The Game in Florence.
All right, here's Ty Kroger. He does want to throw it, and he's got Kerryon Joyner wide open at the 30, 25, cut back at the 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Carolina. Touchdown to Kerryon Joyner. from 47 yards out. Pete Limbo, the magician. Beamer ball is down in the swamp.
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. That was called on the Gamecocks Radio Network. Last year down in the swamp, the unfortunate only points the Gamecocks scored in that game, losing 38-6 to Florida. And that was a game, we kind of look back to what last season was. We're coming away from that. You already had 6 wins on the year. You were looking at the mountain of Tennessee and Clemson the next 2 weeks. People were about as down on this program as you could be coming away from that Florida game last fall.
I mean, rightfully so at the time, I think, as far as what we saw on the field against Florida. I mean, just the absolute go-to example that you will use for the rest of time of the fact that every game stands on its own merit, that you can turn things around, that, sports can be fickle. And, they bounced back, obviously, with 2 of the biggest wins, I would say, at the time in school history. So, yeah, that was... In some ways, that performance maybe forced South Carolina into certain things the last 2 weeks. Sometimes a loss like that can force you into some changes as well, as far as, not necessarily personnel, it didn't seem like, but just the approach on some certain things. And for them, now you have this Florida team coming into Williams-Brice Stadium. We've talked about it so far this week. Florida plays very well at home, not very well on the road, and they're going to need this South Carolina fan base to get there and get there early and be pumped up for this one. I think that's a big factor.
It's a weird Florida team still. Again, full disclosure, I was not super high on them coming into the season. We actually have on a TV in here, guys, we have Florida Vandy going on.
Who's winning?
You want to do some, I'm sure Florida is.
I don't know if they trailed in that game.
What? It's weird plays in that game, by the way. But this is, I wasn't super high on Florida coming into the year, but I always want to be careful to, not bag on a team too badly. They just had a weird season, right? They got trounced by Utah. I mean, that ended up being a 13-point loss. It seemed more like 1,300. They just got beat thoroughly. McNeese, whatever. They beat Tennessee and were pretty doggone impressive. They beat Charlotte, very blah game, very, very meh. They lost to Kentucky, got walloped. And then they beat Vandy like you should. Impressive win, quietly impressive win. They won by 24. Now you may say, it's Vandy, whatever. But guys, Vandy
beat them last year.
Well, Kentucky beat Vandy by 17. Missouri beat Kentucky by 17. Florida, 24-point win, right? Like, all Gamecock fans are sitting around going, I don't know about Kentucky. I don't know about Missouri. Those are tough. I don't write off this Florida team. They still, I think, have some really good pieces defensively. And I do think, look, the number one thing, we talked about it with Boogie Huntley yesterday, they kind of are what they are. There's not many surprises with this Florida team. You know kind of what their identity is. They want to come in, they want to play good defense, they want to run the football with their 2 backs and their offensive line, and they want to give Graham Mertz, easy access throws so he can keep completing 75, 80% of his passes, right? So you've got to be extremely technically sound in this game. But point is, Florida's been up and down, but this is still, in my opinion, a really capable team, and they can do some things that can cause South Carolina a lot of issues based on some struggles that South Carolina's had, too.
I think when you get 2 pretty close teams, which these will be from a talent standpoint, I think, we maybe don't talk enough about the fact of just who executes on that day, who has the ball bounce for them on that day. Like, we like to think of it as, this team is better than that team. Well, if you look at the course of a season, how many different examples can you make of, that team beat that team, but then that team lost to that team? And, the transitive property really struggles in football terms, I think. And, I do think for Florida, now the Charlotte win for Florida obviously was in Gainesville and not that impressive either. But if you look at this team through the prism of, are they a different team at home versus on the road? then it starts to look a little bit more normalized. Like the Florida team that plays in Gainesville plays like a team completely different than the one on the road. Now, I'm sure they've already said they're tweaking things. They're tweaking their schedule going into this week to try to get a hold on that. But, I think that obviously, if you're South Carolina, sets up pretty well for you. Also, the other, I think, big storyline to watch here, at least early in the week, what is the status of Trevor Etienne? And going into last week, the more I've sort of read other places' coverage, I've noticed all college teams kind of have similar things with injuries where, you hear one thing publicly, but there's maybe a little bit more to the story behind the scenes. And leaning on our friends at Gators Online here, Florida On 3 site. So Etienne is dealing with an upper body injury. He was listed as questionable for the Vanderbilt game last week, but internally, according to Gators Online, he was more along the lines last week of doubtful. So it was one of those things where they're hearing with their on-the-ground reporting, he's not playing in this game. He's questionable for that game, but he's doubtful.
Well,
actually,
they likely did not need him to beat that Vanderbilt team. They did just fine with what they had, so it could be a case of, okay, he's getting a better service against South Carolina a week from now. Better to hold him out in this game and wait for the next one.
So I think for them, the big storyline is, all right, is he available? Is he close to 100%? Is he playing hurt? When they've been really good, it has been when they have gotten both Etienne and Montrell Johnson Jr. both going. Talked about this on our podcast yesterday against Carolina last year. They got Montrell Johnson going. They got Etienne going. They got Anthony Richardson going. It was really a three-headed monster. Involved the receivers a little bit in some kind of jet sweep stuff. But for the most part, I mean, all three of those guys had what you would individually call good games, but they were all three in the same game. Really in the same half against South Carolina, the first half. So I do think that home run threat that Etienne brings to that position, or doesn't bring if he's out, is a factor in this game for South Carolina.
Yeah, you go back and look. You made this point yesterday on our pod, Wes. Florida's ability to just run the ball at will, is really the difference in the game. There was the drive that you mentioned. You can add some context where Florida's backed up, and they had, a 3rd and 9? Mm-hmm. And they're like, we're going to play it safe. We're going to run a zone run play, and they got 10 yards.
Yeah, it was.
And that's just back-breaking.
It was one of those days for South Carolina. They came out. Florida scores pretty much every drive in the first half of this game. They had 3 touchdowns, a field goal, and then an end-to-half situation. And, South Carolina played a little bit better in the second half, but you say that. They also had turnovers on, the first 3 drives of the second half. Now, Florida actually did not convert all those into points, which, it was one of those games. It was like, I think 24-6 at the time, and you're kind of like, they've played their worst game of the year to this point, but the game's not over. And they got some stops in the second half, but still Florida was able to just kind of, at that point, you're playing to run the game, to run the clock out to an extent. And they had them backed up for one of the few times in the game. This was, Florida started the drive inside their own 10. It's a 3rd and 9. South Carolina had found a little bit of rhythm on offense and, the prior drive. And they literally just have one of those give-up 3rd downs, Florida does. And they run for 10 yards on a 3rd and 9. And now you're, new set of downs. So it was just one of those days for South Carolina. Everything went wrong for them. I don't know if you put those teams on a neutral field, even last year, a 38-6 game, does it play out like that every time? I would say probably not. But on that given day, Florida was way, 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 way better than South Carolina. So can you reverse that? I do think they've shown the ability to defend the run a bit better than that defense did for most of last year.
I have some stats to back that up.
Okay.
We'll go over later.
We'll hit some of those stats. We can hit those coming up next as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, rolls on here on a Tuesday on the game.
Every Monday, Rich Eisen and Chris Brockman react to what's happening in the world of football on Overreaction Monday.
The AFC North. Not all 4 teams going to make the playoffs.
More likely than not.
More likely than not, right?
Okay.
And I know they've been the king of this jungle for the last few seasons. The Cincinnati Bengals, Rich, are going to miss the playoffs this year.
This is an overreaction. Bengals are not only making the playoffs, they're winning this division. Oh, again, for a third straight year.
Overreaction Monday, the podcast, wherever you listen.
What you're talking about. Sponsored by Love Chevrolet. On your home of the Gamecocks. In Columbia, 107.5 The Game. Also heard on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach. And 100.5 The Game in Florence.
No, these are two completely different teams. Spencer's a really good player. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. He's got a really good group of skill players. They do a nice job of designing concepts. They're very multiple. And, there's no doubt. I mean, every week affecting the quarterback is important, but when you play a guy like Spencer, it's even more important.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. That, of course, was the voice of Billy Napier, head coach for the Florida Gators, as they get set to come into Williams-Brice Stadium this Saturday to take on the Gamecocks. Kickoff at 3:30. Pre-game coverage will start with Gamecocks Game Day. Myself and Terry Ford out at Sound and Images on Bluff Road, going from 10:30 until 12:30, and then network coverage takes you all the way up until kickoff. Chris, you said you had some stats leading into this game?
As I hit my head on the microphone. Yeah, I do have some stats. So, Wes is of the opinion, and I am too, didn't mean to put man on an island.
He looks surprised.
That South Carolina's run defense is better than last year.
Okay.
Okay, Wes, are you still there?
I did say that.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't remember what I say.
Okay, you did say it.
But I've said that multiple times, which I have to own it.
I've said it, and I'm basing it off of eye test. I asked Boogie Huntley. You won't be surprised to know he did not say, no, actually, I think we're worse. I don't think he was going to say that. But I kind of wanted to look over, okay, statistically, is that the case through 5 games? Now, this is not apples to apples for many reasons. One of the reasons is this year South Carolina's played one non-P5 opponent. They played Furman. Last year, through the first 5 games, they had played Charlotte and they had played SC State. And so, some differences there. And then you've got stylistically, like last year's Georgia game, the Dogs averaged 5.9 yards a carry in that game, but their leading rusher, I think, might have been Stetson Bennett. I mean, he had like 36 yards. They just had like 10 guys that had carries that had 25, 35 yards each. They didn't really need it, right? Then you had on the flip side, you had Arkansas where you gave up 295 yards. But the point is, this year it has been kind of a mixed bag. And this team is still not doing well in a couple of key metrics in terms of rush yardage nationally. They're 72nd, giving up 141 yards a game. Third down conversions, they're they're at the bottom, close to the bottom. They're giving up almost 44% on third down, and a big part of that is 2 of the biggest issues with this team, 2 of the biggest worries, pass rush, being able to get off the field in third and long, and then, of course, third and short situations, which goes back to run defense. But the reason I said it was a mixed bag, look, first half and second half of the Georgia game, right? Dawan Edwards ends up getting 118 yards. The first half, they didn't have much success. The second half, they did. The UNC game, British Brooks has 103 yards, but O'Marion Hampton has 37. Woody Marks from Mississippi State comes in. Wasn't he leading the SEC in rushing yards,
yes,
I think, at that point?
Yep.
27 rushing yards on 12 attempts, right? And then Tennessee was, I think, South Carolina's worst performance against the run this year was the Tennessee game. So it's been a mixed bag, and I think the reason that we could say it's better is statistically there's some evidence in spots that they've been better, some individual performances, some moments. I think eyeball test, it's better. Has it been markedly better just on the whole? Like if you take the whole picture, I mean, probably not from a statistical standpoint. It's just been too up and down, too inconsistent, I think. But it's going to be so important this weekend against Florida.
Yeah, and I tend to think, again, when I'm saying that, I'm talking purely eye test as well. And I think you would have had a Georgia State game and factored in last year as well.
Yes, and Georgia State, they averaged 5 yards a carry.
5 yards a carry. So, it's been a much tougher matchup to this point than last year, I think, in terms of what you've had to face off against offensively, for the other team's offenses, I mean. And so I'll be curious to see, do we see that against some not quite as good offenses? Do we see the numbers start to back up what I think I've seen with an eye test? I feel like the defensive line, granted, there is something to be asked for a little bit there in pass rush, and the percentage of times you're getting to the passer while just rushing 4. Yes, I feel like they have done a better job of kind of playing blocks at the point of attack, getting off of blocks, letting the linebackers roam. I think you've got a little bit more athleticism at the linebacker spot than you maybe did last year, and not that they're going to always be able to reproduce what they did against Mississippi State, because that's the best they have played the run, I think, in the entire Beamer tenure against a SEC opponent. Yeah. And that, they just flat out shut them down. And it wasn't really a schematic thing. Like they always have extra guys in the box. It wasn't they just said, we're going to put 100 guys in the box and stop the run. They just flat out played better up front than Mississippi State did. So not that I think you should expect that this week, but I don't think this is a Florida scheme that is that out of the ordinary based, from what you see week in, week out in college ball these days. Like it's kind of similar to what everybody else runs, frankly. So I think that's a little bit of an advantage for you. You always get a little bit of advantage on defense at home. I think I think this is a good passable test for South Carolina's run defense. Tennessee was a good test in that you're saying, maybe, but it's going to be difficult. I think Florida is a good test in saying it's a good test, but it's passable for you.
Well, and the reason that Tennessee's so tough, they got really good backs.
3 of them.
They got a good offensive line, which had Cooper Mays back, which is a really good player. But also their spacing just causes you so many problems. They might be on the boundary side of the field, so the short side of the field, and then they've got 2 receivers a mile away, it seems like, bunched together to the field side. You're taking your DB run support, you're kind of taking a guy or 2 completely out of that picture and out of that box. So if you misfit a gap, there's nothing to clean it up. There's nobody left to clean it up. And we saw that at times. We saw Tennessee being patient, making some guys miss. Saw them, yards after contact was a big thing in that game. This Florida offense is more, and this isn't a knock against, Billy Napier's play calling. It's just schematically, it is different, and it's a little bit more conventional, you could say. Graham Mertz is not going to be the dynamic athlete that an Anthony Richardson was, or he can snap off an 80-yard run, even that Joe Milton was, as limited as he was in that game. And so this game is a little bit more one that you can play in the box, which is more similar to what we saw against Mississippi State. I still think it's dangerous because they got really good backs, but I agree with you, Wes, more of a passable test, I think, even than Tennessee.
It's one of those games where you want to force Graham Mertz to go out there and try and beat you. And Graham Mertz is more serviceable than what Joe Milton has been through the passing game, but he still likes to throw a lot of those short passes, either behind the line of scrimmage or in that 1 to 10 yard range. Now, he's better throwing the ball down the field than a Joe Milton was, but again, kind of shutting down the run game, making Graham Mertz go out there and beat you is going to be one of the keys for Saturday.
Yeah, I don't have... Now, maybe we'll sit here and I'll be proven dead wrong. I don't have a ton of faith in Mertz to just consistently beat you down the field. Like he may hit 1 or 2 on you, and then in the crowd you moan, how do we let that guy get deep? But I live with that. And Joe Milton, his numbers down the field have been bad, but I think you always looked at Joe Milton and you said the possibility, just with the arm strength, the possibility of him hitting these balls down the field was always going to be there. Whereas Mertz, I don't know, maybe I'm completely downplaying the guy, and he proves me wrong, but he just isn't that quarterback that scares you from an opponent's point of view in terms of being able to make all the throws and kind of having the velocity that if you're a DB where, some guys, if you get beat by half step, the arm strength alone kind of concerns you, whereas other guys, you're not really worried about cross-field NFL throws. And with Mertz, I'm not really sure he's displayed that like NFL quarterback ability to attack you every single way, like even a Joe Milton can, I think. And Milton did a little bit more in the running game just as that threat as well, even though he wasn't clearly what Hendon Hooker was the year before.
Absolutely. We'll touch on a little bit of recruiting coming up, as this weekend being at home does allow some guys to be in town and some notable names going to be in Williams-Brice Stadium this weekend, as well as catch up on what some of the commitments have done this past weekend on the high school football fields. We'll talk about that coming up. You're listening to Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks in Columbia, 107.5 The Game. Also heard on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach and 100.5 The Game in Florence.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
And welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the Game. Reminder, coming up on Thursday, going to be out at Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate out in West Columbia. Then Friday, we'll be back out at Steel Hands, both those from 9 until noon. So excited to be out there. Of course, this upcoming weekend, take it on Florida, a home game, which means going to have some recruits in the building, and one that is going to be notably attending this weekend, Cam Fountain, a 2024 Edge prospect, currently committed to Southern Cal out of Atlanta, Georgia, 6'5", 240 pounds, but somebody that Gamecocks hoping to gain some steam with.
Yeah, South Carolina recruiting several guys that are committed to other programs right now, and Fountain's someone they've been in on for quite a while. Not a newer offer, not a newer name. This is an Atlanta kid who South Carolina was involved with very early. Went to Southern Cal this summer on a visit and kind of fell in love with it and decided to commit. But I think very quickly it became apparent kind of behind the scenes, and now publicly it's gotten out in the public sphere a little bit more, that he's still pretty open. He's been to Auburn, visited Auburn. Florida State has gotten involved. He's supposed to go there later this season. And Sterling Lucas, the edge coach, assistant coach for South Carolina, has built a pretty good relationship here too. So it's been anticipated that he would take a follow-up visit to South Carolina. It's now on the books. And I think this is a big one. Obviously Southern Cal is a ways away, and there's a lot to like about that program. But he's got some programs closer to home, South Carolina being one of them, that's on him. And so this is a big need in this class. The edge position, it's been a talking point this year, right, of just being able to develop some older and younger guys on the roster. The pass rush has been talked about a lot. You've got Dylan Stewart committed, which goes a long way from a personnel standpoint into to solving that for the future. And you got a young guy, Desmond Umezulu on the roster, and some others that you can continue to develop. But you need more from the high school ranks. And Cam Fountain's a top 100 player with really good size, former basketball player, or current basketball player too. A lot of athleticism. So we'll see where this one goes, but it's an important visit.
I remember, like you said, man, when he committed to Southern Cal, it was already being talked about in the summer that he was going to take an official visit to South Carolina. And I want to say it was on the books even, or it was very close to being on the books for that visit to take place. So it was one of those things, sometimes when a guy commits elsewhere, it pretty instantly you start hearing, well, hey, this thing is not over by any means. And that was the case here. I think, like Chris said, the fact there are still several other top programs involved. If you're a Gamecock fan, you don't want to get too ahead of yourself on this one. But at the same time, it is probably, I would imagine, a little bit easy to go ahead and start to think, kind of dream about what if you could put this guy opposite of Dylan Stewart in this class and what that would mean for kind of reshaping that position. Two guys that I think could help at that position very early. And, now I think we got a little bit of juice as far as the final tally for 2024. Some new in-state offers going out here recently, Chris. And, I think that the fact that you got some guys to talk about, some guys to sort of track at this point will make things interesting. We've already talked about Bray Staley, but South Carolina also, your story was very timely. And the Gamecocks have offered an in-state prospect who has been committed to Kentucky for a while.
Yeah, Marion's Quay Scott, who is a cousin of TJ Sanders, Garnet Trust Tower alum, picked up an offer on, what was that, last night?
Last night,
yeah. Late last night. Thought it would probably be Sunday. Didn't end up happening, so happened on Monday. He got the word, and this is one to definitely watch. If you're on Flip Watch for some certain players, Cam Fountain being one of them, Quay Scott is certainly one. Told me that he would like to stay close to home. Obviously, from Marion to Columbia, a good bit closer than Marion to Lexington, Kentucky. And, has camped at South Carolina, had actually a good Camp West from both a one-on-one standpoint and a testing standpoint. Gamecocks like him as a corner nickel, and he's had a good start to his senior year, 6-1, and has contributed really in all phases of the game, running the football, catching passes, playing defense. Gamecocks like him as a future DB, and one to watch for sure going down the stretch.
Marion has some under the radar talent.
Yes,
it feels like.
Yep,
over the years.
Got Tyshawn Sanders, who is committed to App State right now. Of course, TJ Sanders came out of Marion as well. So good program, and he's been a key part of what they've done. Kentucky, Wes, guys that Kentucky wants on defense, the Georgia game notwithstanding, they've done a really good job of developing players there. So if they want, that's almost to me kind of a stamp of approval if it's a guy that they want. And the Gamecocks have always had their eye on him as well.
Well, they got Jalen Geiger from Spring Valley playing a bunch. Andrew
Phillips, from the upstate, from Malton.
Yeah, that was a guy South Carolina never really moved on.
Yep.
Kentucky offers. They like those big, kind of tall, rangy guys that they bring in. Maybe they're a little bit raw, but they just develop them in their scheme. And, they didn't play well this past week, obviously, but they've proven against a lot of SEC offenses to give teams fits. So I think that is something to keep an eye on. And there's always, you never want to miss out on in-state talent if they have a chance to help. So it seems like South Carolina has kind of reevaluated as the senior years have progressed for some of these in-state guys and said, look, we're going to take a shot, even if you are committed to another school. Couple of SEC commitments there. Obviously one to Kentucky, one to Tennessee, and Bray Staley. South Carolina saying we're not going to just let you leave, which I kind of respect the fact they didn't just say, all right, they're already committed. We're going to avoid the possibility of going and missing, but we think they can help.
Take a shot. Yeah.
Absolutely. Quick shout out, 2024 commitment, Matthew Fuller, running back out of Wayne County, Georgia. 12 carries, 213 yards, 3 touchdowns this past Friday night.
Chris, you put out the stats every week, but is that not par for the course for him?
It's not a shock. Yeah, he's done that before.
It's
similar.
He's been very 4-star now on 3.
Yeah. Nice.
So,
all right, that'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, it's Halftime Show with Terry, including Coach Beamer's press conference at 1:30. Brought to you by PA Wine Pools and Spas. That's all coming up right here on The Game.
We're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth, the Brown Ambition podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help.
If I do even consider lending, I always ask myself, will this solve the problem? So I know you don't have your money for mortgage because you don't have a job. So what happens next month? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about the next month. Now, it's another thing if you're like, hey, Tiffany, I have $1,000 left to pay my car and then I'm car note free and I'll be able to pay you back, the 3 months I used to pay my car note. That solves the problem.
Brown Ambition.
Wherever you listen.